Okay, so welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking at Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He's a fascinating figure, really, 19th century spiritual teacher. And we're diving into one of his stories today.
And a great story it is. We actually have the original Hebrew text for this one.
Yeah, so we're going to try to unpack it. And we'll try to go through the simple story, what it might mean from a Kabbalistic perspective, and maybe even get a little gematria in there. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan. Let's get started.
All right.
So on the surface, we've got a king who wants his palace decorated. He's got a big hall, and he calls on two painters.
Right, and he says, okay, you guys each take half the hall, and he gives them a deadline. So classic setup, right?
Yeah, it's all about how they approach this task.
Exactly. So the first painter, he's very diligent. He goes out and learns how to paint, right? And he really puts in the effort.
You can really see the effort, actually. The text emphasizes how he's studying, practicing, honing his skills.
Yeah, and he becomes a really good artist. He ends up painting these magnificent murals of animals and birds and just so much detail.
Right, beautiful imagery, full of life. You can almost picture it on the wall.
Absolutely. Now, the second painter, he's a different story. He doesn't actually learn how to paint at all.
Yeah, this is where things get interesting. So the deadline's approaching, and this guy, he's in a bit of a pickle.
To say the least. He realizes he's got no time and no skills, so what does he do? He comes up with this very, very unusual solution.
Clever, you might say. I mean, what he does is he takes this highly polished black plaster and covers his whole half of the wall with it. Turns it into a giant mirror, basically.
And then, just for good measure, he hangs a curtain in front of it. Talk about a last-minute save, huh?
It is. So the big day arrives. The king comes to see the work. And of course, he's totally impressed by the first painter's site. It's everything he wanted, these beautiful, detailed murals.
Right, it's a masterpiece. But then the second painter, he's like, okay, Your Majesty, check this out.
He pulls back the curtain, and the sunlight hits that polished black wall. And what happens? It reflects everything. The first painter's murals, all the beautiful objects in the hall, even things that would be brought in later.
And the king, get this, the king is actually happy with it. So that's the simple story. Now let's jump into the deeper meaning here. Kabbalah, right. In Kabbalah, the king, you can think of him as a representation of the divine.
Yeah, that divine sovereignty, that higher power. And the palace itself, you could see it as the world or even the human soul, that inner space where things unfold.
Right. And those two painters, they embody different approaches to serving the divine, or maybe even just different ways of living a meaningful life.
The first painter, he's all about effort. He's actively engaging in spiritual practice, learning good deeds, like that direct approach.
Right, like the classic idea of doing mitzvah, performing good actions. And then you have the second painter and his reflective wall. That speaks to a different kind of approach.
It's more about receptivity, about humility. It's not about directly creating, but about preparing yourself to receive and reflect the light that's already there.
And that polished black plaster, it's like a symbol of a purified heart. You know, the heart is polished, it's ready to mirror those spiritual truths without the same outward effort, you know?
Exactly. It reminds me of the concept of hishtavut in Kabbalah, this idea of self-nullification. You kind of step aside and allow the divine light to shine through you.
That's really interesting. And the thing is, both approaches are valued by the king, right?
That's a key point. It suggests that there are many paths. You know, sometimes direct action is needed, but sometimes it's about creating the space for reflection, for receptivity.
Exactly. Now, we should also touch on gematria. In Hebrew, each letter also has a numerical value, and gematria is about finding connections between words and phrases that have the same numerical value.
Yeah, it's like a whole other level of meaning hidden within the text.
Right, and we don't have time to go into a full gematria analysis today, but just knowing about this method, you realize that even individual words in the story could have these layers of interconnected meaning in Jewish mystical thought.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. So if we put all this together, it's clear that the story isn't just a simple anecdote. It's got this multifaceted view on effort, on receptivity, on how different approaches can lead to a valued outcome.
And it really makes you think, you know, which painter's approach speaks to you more right now? And what might that say about how you engage with the world?
That's a great question to ponder. And hey, we encourage everyone to go and explore more of Rabbi Nachman's stories and delve deeper into the wisdom of Kabbalah.
It's a journey worth taking, that's for sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.